Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40k Tyranids. We've got another list build for you for the Arcs of Omen for the Tyranid Codex. So today we're going to be doing a 2000 point list and it's going to be a monster mash. Exciting. So let's just get straight into it, right? So for the High Fleet, I was really wanting to go for the Youngman High Fleet, but I've gone with the Behemoth High Fleet. We'll kind of talk about why in the tactics. It saved me a lot of points with adrenal glands. But yeah, we'll get onto that as we go through the video. So, what does a Behemoth High Fleet do? It's a +1 to the strength on the charge. That's kind of the reason why you save on adrenal glands, because that would give you a +1 to your strength and movement, I suppose. And also the adaptive is the re-rolls to your charge rolls. Now, in fact, we're going to be getting rid of that. I mean, we've got the option, but we're going to get rid of that. And we're going to swap it out for the hyper adaptation from the Lurk biomorphologies, which is territorial instincts. So this will give all the monsters objectives secured. And if those monsters have got 10 or more wounds, they're going to count as 5 models when controlling an objective. So army-wide we're going to have OBSEC because we're all monsters here. There's going to be no infantry, purely monsters. They're all going to have OBSEC. And I believe all of them have more than 10 wounds. So they're all going to count as more than 10 models. So let's get into the actual list build. The Warlord and HQ, not the first HQ in fact, for this 2000 point list is a Hive Tyrant. So it comes in at 180 points at base cost. As for the war gear, well, it's coming with a Lash Whip and the monstrous Bone Sword. That's just the standard piece of war gear that it gets. This is a free upgrade, or it's a free option if you like. Strength 10, -4 AP and 3 damage. Now of course with that Lash Whip you're going to get to reroll your hit rolls over 1, which is pretty good. But with Strength 10 you're going to be wounding most things on a 2+ or a 3+ at worst. So the first upgrade of the list is a Heavy Venom Cannon, which is 15 points. That brings our total so far up to 195. This is a 36-inch range weapon, heavy 3, strength 9, -3 AP and 4 damage. Don't forget this is a monster so it can shoot into combat, although it will be at a -1 to hit because it is currently heavy. However, ignore all of that because we're taking a relic. We're using the core stratagem, which is the relic stratagem, for 1 command point to give us a bio artifact for this Hive Tyrant, and we're going to be taking the Shard Gullet. Now the Shard Gullet replaces that Heavy Venom Cannon, so you pay for the Heavy Venom Cannon 15 points, exchange it for the Shard Gullet. It's the same range, 36-inch range. It's Assault 3, not Heavy 3, so you could advance with it. And if you're firing it into combat, there's no -1 to hit penalty. It is now 3 shots, well it's still 3 shots, but it's Strength 12 rather than Strength 9. AP is -5 rather than -3, and the damage is a flat 5 rather than 4. So a much better weapon there for just 1 command point. Now we're also going to spend another command point for the Warlord trait core stratagem, and we're going to give him the adaptive biology Warlord trait, which is effectively a 5+ feel no pain save against all wounds. So these things are already pretty tanky as they are. They're already toughness 8, they've already got 12 wounds with a 2+ armor save and a 4+ invulnerable save with a psychic barrier. So they're already pretty resilient, but with a 5+ feel no pain save on top of that, yeah, pretty good. So we spoke about the war gear, we spoke about the Warlord trait. We need to still mention the psychic powers. We've got the Smite psychic power, we've got the Unstoppable Onslaught because of course we are Behemoth. We've got the Catalyst power on this Hive Tyrant as well as the Onslaught power. We also need to mention that it's got a Synaptic Imperative ability. Now unfortunately this is going to be the only one of this list because we've got no other Synapse monsters, or there is one more, but yeah, it's not going to have one of these Synaptic Imperative abilities. We'll get onto that in a moment. But the Hive Tyrant has the Relentless Furiosity, so units within 6 inches of a Synapse model are eligible to declare a charge in a turn in which they fell back. So that one's quite a decent one because you can see which units are in combat before the turn begins, so you can kind of select it as and when you need it. Now the Bone Sword and Lash Whip doesn't take full advantage of the abilities from the High Fleet with that +1 to the strength on the charge, but I think we're going to get more out of it this way. Having strength 10, -4 AP, 3 damage in combat I think is pretty decent. Now we could have had the Scything Talons, which was strength 7, which would go to strength 8, which of course is a good number. You get extra attacks as well, but the damage is only 2, so I've opted for the Bone Sword and the Lash Whip. Again, we're re-rolling 1s as well. Now we're not going to bother with the adrenal glands, we're not going to bother with the toxin sacs, we don't need to really take any of that stuff. Of course it's a Synapse creature, it's got Shadow of the Warp, we'll have the Hive Mind as well, and we've already mentioned the psychic powers. So that brings us on to the second HQ within this list, and it is another Hive Tyrant. Now you're probably thinking, well, you can't have 2 Hive Tyrants. Well, if you use the new stratagem, well, it's not that new anymore, but the Heroic Support stratagem for 1 command point, so that's the 3rd command point we've spent so far, it allows you to include a second Hive Tyrant effectively. Now this Hive Tyrant is going to have the exact same war gear, the Lash Whip and Monstrous Bone Sword, It's got the heavy venom cannon. Of course, we can't upgrade it to the shard at this time because you can only use that relic once. So we're going to keep the heavy venom cannon on that one. The psychic powers we are going to change up slightly. We've got Smite, Unstoppable Onslaught, and this time we're going to take the Psychic Scream, which is effectively another Smite, and we've got the Neuro Parasite, where you've got more chance of dealing out mortal wounds. So that's the 2 HQs in the list. Let's move on to the fast attack options. Now I've gone with 3 identical models, Morlocks, basically Morlocks. That's a total of 375 points because they're 125 points each. And we're also taking them with the Biostatic Rattle. So what this is, at the start of the fight phase, you select one enemy unit within engagement range of the bearer. You roll 3d6. If the result is greater than the enemy's leadership characteristic, then until the end of the phase, each time a model in that unit makes an attack, that attack's hit roll cannot be re-rolled and the attack's wound roll cannot be re-rolled. So they effectively cannot make any re-rolls against our Morlocks because all 3 of them have got the Biostatic Rattle. That's providing that you can beat their leadership with 3d6. Now, we're not going to bother with Adrenal Glands again because they are Strength 7. On the charge, they're going to go to Strength 8, which is that nice magic number. Going up against Toughness 4, you're going to be wounding them on a 2+. There's 16 attacks with each of these Morlocks, which is pretty good. Unfortunately, there's no extra attacks with the Siren Talons because they've got the Morlock Siren Talons, not quite the same as the standard ones. Then you also get an additional attack with the Toxin Spike as well. So yeah, we're not bothering with the Adrenal Glands, we're not bothering with the Toxin Sacs. Now we could have potentially got the Pincer Tail, which allows us to re-roll 1 hit roll and 1 rune roll, but when you've got 16 attacks, I don't think it's as needed with a model like this, so we've not bothered with that at all. Now the main reasons for taking these, well, there's a few reasons. First of all, the Serpentine Coil, so it's a -1 to hit them in melee, pretty nice. They've got the Distensible Jaws, so when they are selected to fight, anything against, well, any model except for vehicle models that have an engagement range of roll a d6, on a 2, 3, 4 or 5, the unit suffers d3 mortal wounds. On a 6, they suffer 3 mortal wounds, and any models that are destroyed by these mortal wounds, that unit's going to count as being below half strength for the combat attrition test. I mean, that's okay for an extra mortal wounds, but the main reason, well, there's still 2 more abilities. There's the Death from Below ability, which is effectively Deep Strike, or alternatively, you've got the Terror from the Deep. Terror from the Deep, you select one of these Morlocks that is in Strategic Reserves, or Deep Strike Reserves, whatever you want to call it. You put a marker on the battlefield in that command phase, and then in your very next movement phase, they can come in where that marker was placed, and you roll a d6 for any enemy unit within 6 inches of the center of that marker. Adding 1 to that unit if they've got between 6 and 10 models, and if they've got 11 or more, you're going to be adding 2. On a 3, 4, 5 or 6, the unit suffers d3 mortal wounds. On a 7+, the unit suffers d3 plus 3 mortal wounds. Then you actually do set the model up within 12 inches of that center of that marker. So there's quite a large area to put your Morlock in, and you can actually be within 9 inches of enemy models. There's no restriction there, but if you do so, you can't charge. That's the only restriction. If you do come within 12 inches, if you do come within 9 inches, you can't then charge. Now there are unfortunately limitations to this because your opponent could literally screen this out and then your Morlock can't come in. And if you don't throw out enough mortal wounds to clear a unit off, or clear a model off that's in your way, then that could cause a problem because if you can't come in, you're virtually destroyed. So you've got to be a little bit careful where you put the marker and how you've got to react to how your opponent is going to deal with screening off that area. Alternatively, you could just use the Death from Below ability, so normal Deep Strike, and you could pop in anywhere on the battlefield, I suppose, more than 9 inches away from enemy models. So we've got 3 of those. That's our fast attack all done. Next we're moving on to the heavy support. Starting off with 3, it's a 1 unit to begin. 3 can't effects models. You start off in 1 unit, you break them up as soon as you deploy into single models, but it counts as 1 single option with your heavy supports. Again, it's 375 points at base cost, but we're going to do some upgrades, and we're actually going to do quite a lot. We're going to go quite hard with these, all the bells and all the whistles. So War Gear, they're going to have 2 Karn effect Siren Talons. These are Strength 6, -3 AP and 3 damage. These will go to Strength 7 on the charge, which isn't good enough for me, so therefore we need some Adrenal Glands. Adrenal Glands are 10 points per model, so that's 30 points in total, bringing our Karn effects points to 405. This gives a +1 to their movement and a +1 to their strength. That means they're Strength 8, again that magic number. You're wounding Toughness 4 models on a 2+, and everything else you're likely wounding on a 3+, apart from the real tougher stuff you're wounding on a 4+. There are a couple of models that you'll be wounding on a 5+. So that's the Adrenal Glands. Each one is going to have a heavy venom cannon, 10 points per model. Again, 36-inch range, heavy 3, strength 9, -3 AP, 4 damage. Very similar to the Hive Tyrant there. This brings our total 435 for the 3 Karn effects, and we carry on with some more upgrades. We've got the Spore Cysts. These are 15 points per model, so it's quite expensive, this upgrade, but it effectively gives them light cover at all times, which is pretty good. Now bear in mind they've already got 2+ armor save, so when you're giving them light cover at all times as well, that's pretty decent. It's not going to budge them too far from that 2+ armor save. Even -3 AP weapons still give them a 4+ armor save. So that's pretty good. It's almost like having an invuln in a way, unless you're going up against the real heavy weapons with, you know, -4, -5 AP. And then finally there's one more upgrade here, which is the enhanced senses. 10 points per Carnifex. Effectively gives them list skill value of a 3+ instead of a 4+. With those heavy venom cannons, we want to make sure we're hitting as many times as we possibly can. So this in fact gives a total for just the 3 Carnifexes alone, 510 points. So quite an expensive unit here. They're going to be breaking off into 3 separate models as soon as you deploy. They've got the armored eco-skeleton, so it's a -1 to all damage, pretty nice. Also blistering assault, so on the charge or performing heroic interventions, you're going to add 1 to the attacks characteristics, pretty good, especially when they've got 4 attacks. In fact, they've got more than 4 attacks because they've got the Scything Talons, haven't they? With the Scything Talons, you're getting 1 additional attack per Talon. So we've got 2 Scything Talons, so you've got your base attacks of 4, 2 Scything Talons, that's 6. On the charge with that ability, that's 7 attacks, at strength 8, not bad. And we've already mentioned the Monstrous Brood, and of course they've got Death Rows as well. So that's the first heavy support option, which is going to break up into 3. The second one is another single unit, although it is 2 models. It's 2 Screamer Killers. I really love the Screamer Killers, 130 points each. They're effectively another version of a Carnifex with a different data sheet. Now these are coming with the Bioplasmic Scream, which is their range attack weapon. It's Assault D6, Strength 8, -4 AP, 1 damage, but it's got the blast keyword. Now it can't fire blast into combat, unfortunately, so you can't be using that in engagement range. But while you're getting up the battlefield, you're going to be firing this before you actually make the melee charge. They've also come in with the Screamer Killer Talons, which are Strength 6, -3 AP, and 3 damage. Again, with this high fleet, it goes to Strength 7. So again, we're going to need adrenal glands here, which will put it to strength 8. 10 points per adrenal gland, that makes 20 points in total. So that's 280 points for the 2 Screamer Killers. Now I thought, you know what, we may as well spend some more points because we're beefing all our monsters up. We're going to go with the Spore Cyst again. I know they're expensive, but having light cover is pretty good. And having all 5 of our Carnifex models with light cover all game, and -1 to damage as well, right? So yeah, they got the -1 to damage, similar to the Carnifexes. Blistering Assault, again, similar to the Carnifexes. Monstrous Brood, so you can split them up into individual models. And they've also got the Terrifying ability. So whenever you destroy a model, you're subtracting 1 from their leadership characteristics to a maximum of -4. So if you take away 4 models in a single unit, that's -4 leadership. Of course, it'd be -4 plus the models they've actually lost. So that would in fact be -8 to their leadership. So you can do quite a bit of work just in the morale phase alone. That brings us on to our third option, which is, well, it's the third and fourth option because we're going with the heavy support options for the Arcs of Omen detachment. And we've got 2 identical units of Tyranifexes. A total of 370 points for the 2 models. 3 options when you're taking Tyranifexes. For this list, I'm going with the Rupture Cannons. The 20 points per Rupture Cannon, 48-inch range, heavy 3, strength 14, -4 AP, D6 plus 4 damage. So you're getting an average damage of 7 or even 8 if one goes through. Now there's not that many shots here, you're getting 6 shots in total from the 2, but you're going to be wounding on 2s, and that AP will take their armor almost completely away, if not completely away. It just depends on if they've got an invuln save or not. But yeah, D6 plus 4 damage is hefty. Now what I like about these, again, toughness 8 because they're monsters, 17 wounds, 2+ armor save. They're moving 9 inches as well. Yeah, absolute tanks at the back end of your field. Right, let's talk about some tactics now. We're going to talk tactics, we're going to talk about how I look to deploy and how I look to move my monsters around the battlefield. And also we need to talk about secondary objectives as well. So we've already briefly spoke about the Relentless Furiosity from the Synaptic Imperative ability, so we don't need to really go through that again. But let's take a random mission from a Strike Force game, from the Arcs of Omen mission book. So I'm just taking this random mission here. Obviously it all depends on the map, all depends on the terrain, all depends on where the objectives are, but I've just taken this as a random example. And let's begin with how I want to move my model across the battlefield. So I'm going to start with the Hive Tyrants because I'm going to use them in quite a weird way. Now my Hive Tyrants are going to be more mid-ground objective holders. They're very tanky, as we already went through. Toughness 8, 2+ armor save, 4+ invulnerable save. One of them's got the Adaptive Biology Warlord trait, so they've got 5+ for no pain. I want them sitting on our, not necessarily our home objectives, but the no man's land objectives, but more closer to home if you like. they're going to be sat there because they're going to be sort of a third wave of attack, and we'll get onto that part in a moment. So in fact, I've showed you on the screen here roughly where I want them positioned throughout the game if everything goes according to plan. So the 2 Screamer Killers, I want them forward. They're going to be my most forward units apart from when the Morlocks come in, but we'll talk about those in a moment as well. So we want them attacking anything that gets close to our half of the battlefield, or anything that they can get hold of that's, you know, a shooty unit. Maybe it's a shooty infantry unit, so we can stop them from firing, or we can get hold of some, you know, real tanky stuff that we just don't want firing at our Hive Tyrants. So they're going to be going sort of in that position there, sort of 2/3 across the battlefield. They've got the speed to do it, they've also got the adrenal glands for the +1 to the movement. Potentially we can cast Onslaught on one of these if needed as well. As for the 3 Carnifexes with the heavy venom cannons and the Siren Talons, they're going to be going pretty much halfway on the battlefield. They're going to be the second wave. We want them to be selecting their targets rather than getting into engagement range and then having to shoot into engagement range with the heavy venom cannons. So they're going to be on the center, you know, the center line. Maybe there's objectives in the center of the battlefield. Maybe your opponent is trying to get to the center of the battlefield. Maybe they're trying to do warp ritual, or maybe there's a mission objective which gets them to the center of the battlefield to get some points. But if we can dominate the central area with the 3 Carnifexes, that would be great. I mean, it depends on what your opponent brings to how narrow they can go, but we've got the option of spreading them really wide or keeping them really narrow. Just depends on what your opponent does and the mission and the objectives. So that's the Carnifexes, roughly where they're going to be going. The Tyrannofexes, of course, are going to be in the backfields. If you've got objectives in your deployment zone, they're going to be sat on those. Toughness 8, 2+ armor save, they're going to be comfortably just guarding those. They're also going to be an anti-deep strike as well, very similar to the Hive Tyrant in fact. In fact, speaking of anti-deep strike, if you notice now when we've got all of these on the map, if everything here is positioned as it is by sort of turn, maybe turn 1, turn 2, then obviously depending on if you go first as well, you've kind of created this circle now where your opponent can't enter the battlefield. Of course, there's going to be this little area in the centre here, in between the Tyrannofexes. There could be a little gap for your opponent to sneak in. If there is a gap, then your middle Carnifex can simply just step back 6 inches or so to block that place out. But that's going to prevent your opponent from literally coming in early game anyway. Then you've got the Morlocks. You've got 3 Morlocks, and you've got the option of either using the deep striking ability or the Terror from the Deep ability. So you can only use that ability on 2 out of the 3 Morlocks, because of course in turn 1 you can announce ready for turn 2 where your marker's going to go. Then in turn 2 that Morloc's going to come in. And while you're in turn 2, you can put down another marker ready for turn 3. But in turn 3, you can't put another marker for turn 4 because turn 4 is too late. You can't be deep striking models in at turn 4. So one of them is going to have to come in naturally with the deep strike ability, which of course is Death from Below. But 2 of them can be using that ability if needed. Again, you can throw out mortal wounds. Maybe you can find a weak spot where you know you're going to be safe coming into the battlefield. If your opponent's got loads of models in their deployment zone, maybe you're playing Tau, maybe there's orcs and they're all over the place. It's not ideal, they're going to screen it off, you're going to die. But if there's a few gaps, definitely do it. Try to throw out mortal wounds and get onto an objective. Remember, these Morlocks have objectives secured and they count as 5 models as well. So yeah, 2 of them could potentially use that. One of them's going to use the standard deep strike ability. It's a free roll here. It all depends on, again, the mission, where the objectives are, where your opponent's weaknesses are, or if you just need to beef up one area of the battlefield where you've maybe lost one of your Carnifexes. That's what these Morlocks are for. So once everything is on the battlefield, this is kind of roughly what I'd want to do in an ideal situation. I'd have all these models as they are. Of course, it doesn't always go to plan like that. You might lose a couple of different models on one of your flanks. Maybe the mission hasn't been as nice to you and the objective markers aren't quite where you want them to be. So you'd have to kind of be a bit flexible with where you position your monsters. Right, as for the secondaries, there's only really 3 that we could select for. I mean, there are some others, but it all depends on what your opponent brings. But for 3 that we can bank on, if you like, I've got 3 for you. So the first one is engage on all fronts. So you're scoring 2 victory points if you've got a monster in 3 of your table quarters, and of course you're going to gain 3 victory points if you can control 4 of the quarters. And we've got all these monsters that are going to be pretty hard to shift, pretty resilient. We should be able to score engage on all fronts, especially with the Morlocks. Now behind enemy lines is also an option here, so if you wanted to change it for behind enemy lines, you could use your Morlocks to do so. But once you've lost your Morlocks, you are then relying on your Screamer Killers maybe, and if you lose them, you could be in big trouble. So I think I would prefer engage on all fronts on this occasion, but behind enemy lines is definitely a good shout. The second secondary that I'm going to be taking for this list is Cranial Feasting. I don't normally take this one, but I think this one, it kind of forced my hand because there's not that many options here, as I mentioned. Each time you kill an enemy character model or unit champion in melee by a Hive Tendril model in your army, you roll a d6, adding 1 to the result if they're feeder tendrils, which we don't have. And you add 2 if it's a character model. On a 6+, you gain a command point. So you would presume that your opponent's going to bring at least 2 characters, maybe 3, maybe even more, and they might have some elite characters. So you should have plenty of opportunities to have a 4+ roll at trying to get that command point. And of course, if you do roll it, you're going to get 3 victory points just like that. Easy. I think it's a 50-50 each time, but you should be getting it throughout the game. Just the once, of course. You're then scoring 1 victory point for any unit champions that are destroyed. In melee, that is. Again, if you're going up against, say, Space Marines, there's going to be sergeants within units. You should be taking those out quite comfortably. 1 victory point each one, not bad. And if it's a character, that's 3 victory points. Again, there could be 3 characters. Now, unfortunately, we're not going to get any extra points for killing warlords. Again, we don't have feeder tendrils models. But for every character, again, there could be 3 characters. That could be 9 points right there. There could be a couple of unit champions, perhaps. That could be 10, 11. And then you're going to be scoring 3 points for trying to get a command point back. So you should be scoring quite high with this, at least 10. All depends on what your opponent brings, I guess. Now, if your opponent isn't bringing that many characters, then you could switch this out to potentially bring it down. Bring it down for all the big stuff, the monsters and vehicles. You're going to get points for that. But I wouldn't bother with assassination because it's effectively the same thing. 3 victory points for every character. You get 1 extra for the warlord, but you're not going to get any for the sergeants in their army. So I wouldn't bother with assassination. It's pretty much a better version of assassination if you're taking cranial feasting. Then the final one I'm going to go with today, again, I don't normally go for this one at all. I normally avoid it at all costs, but for this list I think it actually works, which is grind them down. Grind them down is usually a huge risk because you need to score more than your opponent does in terms of killing models or killing units. However, we've got not that many models because they're all monsters and they're all very resilient. So the likelihood is you might lose 1 model per turn, possibly 2, but the likelihood is we're killing more than them. They're going to have maybe lots of min units. We can absolutely flatten them. And every time we do that, every battle round we do that, that's 3 victory points. So I think we should score quite well with that. Now, unfortunately, we need to do it in every single battle round in order to maximize that secondary objective with 15 points. But even if we get 9 or 12, I'm okay with that. This is, after all, a Monster Mash list. It's not a super highly competitive list. It is just sort of a themed list after all. So guys, that is the end of my 2000 point Monster Mash Tyranid list. Have you tried this kind of list out or any of your Monster Mash list? In fact, if you have, put your list down below so I can see it, or join the Discord and put it in there as well. So yeah guys, that is it from me today. Thank you all for watching. See you in the next one.